Hello. I want to again talk a little bit about the unbelievably marvelous adaptations or modifications of the orchid flower. And I want to start off by just reading some of the things Darwin said about orchids, because as I've mentioned before, Darwin, after he wrote his origin book, devoted a large portion of the next several years, or actually 5 years, to orchids. And actually he had a lifelong interest in orchids. So here's what he said about orchids. In my examination of the orchids, hardly any fact has so much struck me as the endless diversity of the flower structure for gaining the very same end, namely the fertilization of one flower by the pollen of another. So he's making reference there that the flower has been altered here to ensure cross-fertilization. He also said the diversity of contrivances, or contraptions is another great word, the diversity of contraptions or contrivances adopted to favor cross-fertilization of flowers seems to be inexhaustible. And I'll give you some examples of that. And finally, he said, I was never more interested in any subject in all my life than in orchids. So if Darwin's interested in these, there's a good reason to be interested in them. So here's what I want to illustrate today. I have two different orchids here, and but the same part of the petal has been modified to appeal to a different pollinator. And the orchids are notorious for modifying their labellum to attract different pollinators. And that's why I think there's an enormous diversity of orchids, because for some reason, this part of the flower in all orchids is very mutable, it seems like. And the areas where these orchids are putting out variable structures because they are sexually reproducing, cross-fertilizing, there's enough variety in each new generation that you can have very, very enormous modifications over a period of time. Here's the common orchid that you see at the stores, where it's got this labellum right here. That's a petal. The orchid has three sepals and 3 petals, and it's the third petal, normally the one on the bottom, which is altered to ensure landing of insects or smells like a scent that attracts certain insects. This one here is probably pollinated by bees because it's probably for nectar, or because it's got a little bit of a scent. But this is what you're familiar with. Now here's one that's been modified in another very interesting way, but it's the same part of the flower as that. Yet look at this one here. Same story, 3 sepals, but 2 petals, and then it's got this weird-looking thing called a duckbill. And in this case, when this smells like a rotting flesh. The fly is either attracted to feed on the flesh, or deposit eggs inside the plant here. But the fly alights on the tip here and is springboarded into the reproductive part of the plant right here. You can see that if you got close enough, you could see the pollemia, but you probably can't. It's tucked away there. Nevertheless, it crawls right up in here, and it's kind of catapulted into this reproductive structure here, the stigmata, where the pollen comes off of the fly, which it picked up from another flower, and fertilizes this flower. And what's happened in the orchid family over thousands and millions of generations is, as the plants have modified these basically advertisement for pollination, the variety of the flowers in the orchids is just something that's almost unbelievable. And these 2 orchids illustrate the point. Can you imagine this being a modification of that? Yet it is. I presume a slight modification of the gene that made this develop is also making this develop, with a little bit of different, turning this gene on, this gene off. But this illustrates 2 points that Darwin I think was aware of when he first started studying them. that these plants here go to great lengths to ensure cross-fertilization, which increases variety. And the variety in an environment where variety is shifting or pollinators are always coming in and out of the ecosystem, allows these different flowers to evolve. And I believe there's 25,000 different kinds of species of orchids. These two illustrate some variety, but there's many more. And now we know why Darwin was so fascinated by them. Anybody would be who's interested in the modification, that descent with modification. Thanks.